everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Sound Design. Today, we are going to be looking at the sounds of Dannic, and we're going to talk about how his sound was achieved. The Dannic sound, honestly, I feel it can't be achieved on Silent 1 unless you're creating the detuned stab or pluck, however you like to call it. So this one you're gonna need Massive just for the reason of the noise section. Massive has a really great noise section and modulation section. So we're gonna go a little bit into depth on how to create the sound, and this is how it's gonna sound like. And then we're gonna create the detune pluck as well. But this is how it's gonna sound like. Okay. So this is gonna be the Dannic pluck from Blueprint. He collaborated with sick individuals on it, and the nice thing about Dannic is that he doesn't give up his sound. His sound is really kind of groovy with a lot of stabs and percussion. So, it's nice to kind of create something else other than a big room lead from what is huge right now. Okay, so if you haven't seen my Facebook post today, I'm gonna upload a couple of videos. I'm gonna be getting these videos out because these has been some of the most requested ones, and I have time today to get a few of them done. So, it's 7:29 in the morning. So we're gonna do that. So just make sure to stick around. Come back in like 3 hours, and there'll be a new tutorial up. Okay, so let's start creating the Dannic sound. So you're gonna need Massive for this. You're not gonna be able to use Silent One to recreate this, for the reason that Massive is gonna give you all the effects you need. The noise section is gonna give you a very important part of the sound, and then the modulation oscillator is pretty good as well. Now, the reason this can't be duplicated in Silent 1 is because Silent 1 doesn't have almost all the features that Massive does, but Silent 1 does have a punchier and more aggressive sound to it than Massive. Massive is great for experimental sounds, and this is what the Dannic sound is. It's more experimental than, honestly, like more ordinary, like just a normal saw and square. We're going to be modulating and so forth. So let's get started. Okay, so for oscillator 1, we're going to be using a square saw 1 wavetable. And I call it a wavetable because that's how Massive works. And I think one of the things that makes Massive way better than Silent 1 is the fact that you have so many wavetables you can work with. And each wavetable is pretty much, I would like to say, a modified version of, let's say, your four basic, your basic ones, which is a saw, a square, a sine, and a triangle. So it gives you so much to work with. And then with wavetable positions, what you can do is you can change the way the wave is going to look, and in turn you're going to change the way it sounds. So pretty much here, if I'm all the way to the left on wavetable, it's going to be a square, and then all the way to the right is going to be a saw. So let me okay, so just making sure I didn't change anything drastically. So for oscillator 1, we're going to be putting a simple square and saw 1, wavetable position all the way to the right, intensity all the way up, and amp all the way up. We're going to leave this in the center. Next thing, we're going to go to oscillator 2 with a square saw and 1, negative 12 octave, wavetable position all the way to the left, intensity all the way up, and amp all the way up. Next, again, another square saw 1. This one, however, is going to be negative 0.30. Now, I've explained in my other videos why certain artists like to do this and why I do it as well. And that's a technique. It's negative 0.30. As you just change it, it's kind of like detuning it a little bit, but you just open the sound more. So it's like you don't want two guys with the same voice just being next to each other. You kind of want two guys with different voices that will complement each other. So a little change in detunement adds more of a, makes the sound a lot more bigger. And that's the main reason for that change in pitch there, like the very minimalistic one. Next, we go into the phase, which is going to be routed to oscillator 2. And we're going to put it at 12 o'clock. And then we go into the noise section. And this is another important part of creating the Dannic sound. You're going to use a high metallic from the noise. You're going to put the amp at pretty much 3 o'clock. And the noise all the way up. Okay, next we go into the feedback section. You're just going to turn it on and move it a little bit up. Not that much, though. You can always keep it down, but it's just there. It's going to give it a little bit more volume. And that's pretty much the purpose of it, to make it sound huge. But if you were to put the feedback all the way up, it's going to create an effect where you create feedback through through massive and through the routing section, and pretty much you get a distortion or you get the sound to get loud. It depends on like the waves you're using and so forth, and the effects as well. Next, we're gonna go and get a parabolic shaper, and we're gonna put the dry and wet at 12 o'clock with the drive at 12. The parabolic shaper is another great way to get your sound loud, but it also makes it a little bit more, how do I like to call it, more clap, like more, it gives it a lot more punch just due to the drive that you can add, and the drive is going to be set to 12. And next thing we're going to put is a hard clipper, dry and wet 12 and drive 12. And this is another one of those effects that again is going to make it sound more in your face. Okay, so then we're going to go into filter 1, and we're going to have 2 filters for the sound. So the first one is going to be a low pass 4 filter with the cutoff set to 11 o'clock. So don't worry about the blue, we'll get into it later. Resonance is set to 9. If you don't know what resonance is, I always show these in my videos. Eventually I'll stop when people understand it. Resonance is pretty much this point of your filter and how much you're going to let out at that point, as you can see. So up, low, high. So that's going to be your resonance. So you can see it visually. So that's what's happening when you put the resonance up. You're going to put the volume knob like to the point where you only see 2 lines. Next, we're going to filter 2, and again, volume before you see 2 lines. And we're going to be putting a band reject filter. So we're going to put the cutoff at around 10, bandwidth at 10, resonance at 10. And this is going to be another key part of the sound. This is going to give the sound that that highness. And pretty much what band reject does, it pretty much rejects a certain bandwidth and it lets others out. And pretty much it's like a band pass. It's just a different type that you get to select the frequency, the bandwidth, sorry. So it's a pretty cool filter, and it's great to route it through something that looks like a low pass and then route it through the band reject. Okay, a little confusing there, but just, I mean, like the best thing to do is, let's say you don't know what these filters do. Like they're gonna be hybrids of the low pass and high pass, and some of them may be put together and so forth. And then some of them, like the scream, is just gonna give you the opportunity to apply some scream effect that works great with when you put the resonance up and you get those Dutch leads and so forth. So it's good to experiment with them. Just get a normal saw and see what they do, and then you can get a sense of what it's gonna sound like. Okay, so once we have that, we're gonna go into the voicing section. Voicing section is where pretty much you're gonna put some detunement, change the pan positioning, which pretty much is just another word for stereo, and change the way the sound works. So this is going to be a really simple voicing programming. We're just going to put 6 unisono, polyphon on, so I'll let you play more than 1 note, which I don't recommend with this sound still. The pitch cutoff, it's another way of saying detunement for me. We're going to put it at negative 0.13, and we're going to put it all the way up. Okay, so once we have that, we're pretty much done with this section. We're going to go into envelope 4. Envelope 4, this is a very important part of sound design. I've gotten into ADSR before in some of my videos, mainly trans design. So if you don't know what ADSR is, I recommend you go check that video out and get yourself familiar with it, so you can too start creating your own sounds, because I believe that ADSR is pretty much the basis of synthesis. If you don't know what ADSR is and you're just fucking around with the oscillators and changing shit, but you can't create a plug, so okay, what's the purpose of changing the sound if you can't shape the sound into a plug or into a sustained lead or into a pan and so forth? So ADSR is going to help you with that, and also it's going to help you with modulation through envelopes, which we're going to do here. So you really need to understand the concept of ADSR, which stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release. Okay, so let's get into it. So our attack is going to be set to 8 o'clock. Okay, so you want it looking like this if you don't know where 8 o'clock is. And that's the great thing about Massive. It gives you a visual representation of how the sound is going to be shaped, how it's going to come out. And it's really not that hard. This is going to decide how fast volume comes out. So your volume is going to go from low to high at this slope. If I were to have it all the way down, the slope is it's pretty much, I would say short, and it's not that gradual. So it's more fast, and sound just comes out straight in your face. Okay, so here we're going to have the attack set to 8, which is still going to give that effect of straight in your face, and it's a very minimalistic type of attack that really it's really going to be not that noticeable. Of course, level is going to be all the way up, and that's just going to decide how much the volume, it's another volume knob in my idea. Decay is going to be set to 12 with the level to 12. And when you see the decay, that's going to decide how long it takes to reach the sustain level. If you see here, this is a sustain level. You can see the decay gets longer. So it takes, the decay decides how long it goes down to the sustain level. Okay, so let's do that. So we're going to do that, leave the decaying level at 12. And XR release is going to be a little bit high at 10. Whenever you're creating stabs, you always want a high release. That's what changes a stab from a pluck. A pluck doesn't have a long release, so usually you're gonna kind of rely on the delay to give the pluck more of a room. But with the stab, the difference is that you have the same programming as, let's say, a pluck in a way, but you have a high release, and that's what makes a stab different from a pluck, just for knowledge. Okay, so next we're going to go into envelope 1, where we're going to route this to our cutoff knob. And this is why ADSR is important, because a lot of modern sounds now, what's going on is that the envelopes are being used instead of LFOs. And the reason for that is because envelopes are very different to LFOs. And in the way that an envelope will activate only once when you hold the note down. But let's say I were to apply an LFO to this sound and I were to hold the note down, what's going to happen is the LFO is still going to keep going out and going and going and going and going. On account of, if I had an LFO, it only happens once. Okay, so we're going to use envelope 1, and we're going to set the attack to 8 o'clock with the level all the way up. We're going to lower the decay down to 10, and we're going to roll our sustain level all the way down. Okay, and next we're going to put a release of 8 o'clock between 8 and 9, which is here. Okay, so once we have that, pretty much the next thing to do would be just to program the effects. And this is where we're going to see a noticeable change in volume. And it's going to sound really fat thanks to some just some normal effects. So here we're going to be having I believe it's called the teletube, dry and wet set to 12, and the drive set to 12. Next, we're going to be putting a dimension expander. I've explained a dimension expander, what it does. Pretty much if you see your utility in Ableton or in any of the programs you're using, it might be called something else. You're going to have a width section where you can increase it to 200 or put it down to 0. Obviously, width at 0 means mono, where at 100 it's at normal. But a dimension expander is just like a utility. It widens the sounds, and what pretty much that effect it's going to give is that you're going to hear more towards the sides. But the key difference here is that the dimension expander has more balls than the utility. The utility is going to widen your sound. That's pretty much it. While the dimension expander is going to make it louder, and it's going to pretty much make it sound huge, while at the same time, spurting it out more toward in your frequency and stereo field. So that's what that's going to do. And we're going to go into we're going to go into our EQ section. We have our low shove at 12, boost at 2, frequency at 2, and high shove at 2. So once we have that, we have created the first Dannic pluck. Okay, so that's going to be this part of the tutorial. Next, we're going to go and create the detune pluck. The detune pluck, it's used in Blueprint in the background, but in some of his earlier works, like Viper or I'm not sure if Kentucky uses it. I know Viper uses it, and I think it's just Viper. But anyways, it's gonna be a detuned saw pretty much, and we're gonna be creating it today, and we're gonna be using again more envelopes, which is ADSR is really important. This is how it's gonna sound like. Okay, so that's going to be the pluck. Again, like I've stated before, the programming is really important when it comes to Dannic's grooves and everything, so you got to be really creative with them. But here we go. We're going to be creating the Blueprint detune pluck, or the Viper pluck, and stab, or Dannic stab, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so oscillator 1, we're going to be using another square saw on 1, basic another square saw on 1, and oscillator 3 and 2 are going to be same basic square saw. 1. Okay, so all of them are going to be turned on. All of them are going to be wavetable position all the way to the right, intensity all the way to the right, and amp all the way to the right. So thinking, if you were to click a note right now, this is going to sound really, really, really loud. So you got to be, you got to lower your volume a bit. Okay, so pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to pitch oscillator 1 up to 12, oscillator 2 up to 12, and oscillator 3 leave it by default at 0.00. Again, we're going to be applying a phase to our oscillator 1 at negative 0.16 pitch, phase at 12, oscillator 1. Next, we're going to go into the noise section. We're going to be applying some white noise. Amp is going to be set to 12, and the filter is going to be in the middle. And oscillator 1, 2, and 3 are going to be routed all the way up, okay? So, so noise, amp 12, and color all the way up. Next, feedback section is on, just turn it off. We're going to go into insert 1 where we're going to have another parabolic shaper. I've explained what parabolic shaper does. It makes it sound more in your face. It's great to use with saws. I'm sure if you use it with other sounds, other wavetables, you'll get a neat effect as well. Next, we're going to be putting bit crush, which is going to crush really the high end of the sound, which is generally there just for the white noise. Dry and wet set to 12 with crush to 12. Okay, so now we're going to go into filter 1 with the low pass 4 filter. We're going to put the cutoff at 10 o'clock again, and our filter 2 is another low pass 4 filter set to 9 o'clock. Again, then the filter knobs 2, you want to see 2 lines or 3, and that's where you want to place your volume knobs for your filters, and these are what they are. Your mix, I'm not sure if I changed it, but it's going to be set all the way up. Okay, so once we have that, now we got to get into the envelope. So first, we're going to go into envelope 4, and this is where you shape your sound. And like I've said, if you don't know how to shape your sound, then what's the point of trying to make a sound? So this is how we're going to create a pluck or stab, the Dannic pluck and stab. If you want more, you can increase the release, but for now, we're going to leave it like this. So we're going to have a really attack set to 8 again. Level all the way up, of course. You want the full volume amount. Decay 12, but we're going to lower the sustain level all the way down. And our release is set to 8. Next, we're going to go into envelope 1, which is going to look similar to envelope 4, but it's going to be a little bit different because it's going to be routed to our filter. And on the filter, it's going to be routed to filter 1 and 2. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to be putting the attack at 8, level all the way up. Decay is set to 10, and the decay level set to 10, and the sustain, which is level knob, all the way down, and no release. Okay, so we're going to drag these, put them here, and pretty much you're going to click and pull up. You're going to do the same thing for filter 2. Click and pull up until it's all the way around. What that's going to do is it's going to open up the filter or the cutoff knob like this. So the knob's going to go straight like this, and then it's going to go back down to where it was. And the way you're going to know how fast or how long it's going to take is due through ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release. Next, we're going to go into envelope 2, which is going to be routed to the pitch of our sounds. So what's going to happen is our pitch is going to increase when we click on it. So it's a pretty cool effect, and it's something that I learned through reverse engineering sounds from other math sound designers. And pretty much something I noticed was that every time they were making a big room lead or anything big roomish, they started applying these LFOs or these envelopes to the pitch, and eventually I realized why, and it's because it gives it more of a punch and more grittiness, and it's hard to explain, but we'll look into it more when we create the show tech lead. So here we have envelope 2. Our attack is pretty much set to 8 o'clock, level all the way up, decay all the way down with sustain all the way down, and release is going to be set to around 8 o'clock. So it's going to look like this. We're going to bring these here. It's going to look like this, 0. All you're going to do is click on the number all the way to the left in front of the decimal, and you're just going to click and pull up to 12. And you're going to do these for all the 3 oscillators. Okay, so once we have that, we're almost done with the sound. We're going to go into voicing, turn the pitch cutoff on, set the value to negative 0.14, and then we're going to put it at polyphone with a unison of 6. if you see something, Dannic sounds have similar characteristics to them. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our effects section where we're going to be putting another T-tube and another dimension expander, but the dimension expander is going to be set to 9 o'clock. Size to 12, and our EQ is gonna, the low shelf is 12, boost 12, frequency 12, and we're gonna put a high shelf at 2. Now you're gonna be seeing the low shelf and high shelf, and I've explained this before in my videos, but just for you guys who are watching my videos for the first time, a high shelf is pretty much this, and you can see where it gets its name from, high shelf. And you can see what's going on is that you're gonna select the frequency that you want your high shelf in, and then add anything to the right of a high shelf to the highs, anything from where it's at to up the higher frequencies is going to increase. So that's what high shelf does, and it's great to make certain sounds come out, but the key thing is that you got to pair up with other things too, like a low pass, and then you do the high shelf, but then you can kind of lower your super highs a little bit down to tame them. Okay, so that's what a high shelf is. So pretty much high shelf is set to 1, low shelf is set to 12, so no change there. Frequency 12 and boost 12. So once we have that, you're going to be having this pluck. Anyways, guys, this is going to be the end of our Dannic tutorial. Make sure to stick around today. We're going to be creating the Showtech lead, Dyro lead, and possibly the Tsunami lead from Merck and Cremont. Well, that's been it, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and please make sure to subscribe, hit the like button. If you couldn't recreate these sounds or I was going too fast, at least you know what the parameters do. You can download the sound off my Facebook page and have fun with it. Anyways, guys, I'll see you guys in a couple of hours, I guess.